happening? A happy Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. It is very much appreciated. And look, I had to do a bonus podcast today because I'm reading a bunch of things on Twitter and I had a little bit of a theory pop up into my head. So before I get to that theory, don't forget to help us out on this channel. The way you do that is through quote unquote engagement here on YouTube. That means give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. More likes means more eyeballs. Also throw a comment in. Let's see if you agree with my theory, disagree with my theory, or you just like the idea of this bonus out of nowhere impromptu Thursday podcast happening. Throw a comment in there. If you're watching live, if you're watching on demand, you can help us out by doing that and subscribe. We're now past 4,000 subscribers on this channel, trying to get to 4,500. That's the next goal. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all those good things. Spotify, Apple Pods, on demand, rate, and review. All right, so there's been a lot of talk about Jacoby Brissett versus Drake Maye. The idea of when is Drake Maye going to take over? When is he going to be the starting quarterback of this football team? And that talk has continued to ramp up over the last 5, 6, 7 days. Of course, the Patriots played last Thursday night, a week ago tonight. And of course, that means there's going to be extra time to talk about stuff, right? Because you have those extra couple of days. And the media is going to continue to talk about Maye versus Brissett. Shoot, I talked about Drake Maye on this podcast yesterday and whether or not I would start him anytime soon. So all that conversation has been happening. And I told you yesterday that I would wait. If I were the Patriots, I would wait. I would wait for things to get better. I would wait for the offensive line to be a little bit healthier. Let Kendrick Bourne come back. Let Alex Van Pelt find his sea legs, so to speak, as a play caller. Maybe week 8, maybe week 9. You could pull the trigger then. Well, before the season kicked off, there was a lot of conjecture about week 5. Evan Lazar was one of the first guys I heard talk about this. I'm sure he's not the only guy who talked about this, but week 5 seemed perfect. Kendrick Bourne could come off the pup, and by week 5, he'd be back, good to go, hopefully healthy. After a month, you would be able to settle that offensive line. Van Pelt would have a month of play calling under his belt. Miami at home wasn't the most difficult task when you compare that assignment versus the first 4 games of the season. So there was a lot of talk about week 5. And I think there's something fishy going on. I think there's something fishy going on over the past 24 hours or so. Follow me on this. Last night, NBC Sports Boston, I'm watching Felger and Holly. My buddy Phil Perry's on the show. He's on BST. And Perry mentions that the defensive players that he spoke with in the locker room, they were very complimentary about Drake Maye's play at practice. They were talking Maye up and how good he looked at practice, which was interesting because we hadn't really heard anything about Drake Maye and how he looked at practice until last night. Then today, Mark Daniels, he writes a story about Drake Maye and how he's looked at practice. Daniels tweeted out that defensive assistants were gushing over Drake Maye's performances at practice. So that's 2 reporters. Then Burt Breer was on 98.5. And Burt on Zolak and Bertrand talked about how Drake Maye's the real deal. Talked about how Drake Maye's looking good. And I sat back and I said, look, I trust all 3 of these guys. I think Phil Perry, Mark Daniels, Albert Breer, all 3 of those guys, very good at what they do. And I trust the fact that Perry, Daniels, and Breer got this information from people with the Patriots, players in that locker room. I trust that, 100% trust that. I think this is good reporting. I think it's bona fide and trusted reporting. There's no doubt in my mind that those 3 gentlemen talked to people, whether they were players or others in this organization, and they started to get this information about Drake Maye and how he was performing at practice. So I have no doubt about the reporting. But here's the theory, and I don't know if you agree with this. It feels to me like this is a coordinated PR campaign. It feels to me that the Patriots are getting the word out to multiple reporters, local and national, And they're starting to leak this word out about how good Drake Maye has been at practice. It feels like this is coordinated. It feels like this is a public relations campaign to get people ready for Drake Maye. All of a sudden, everything has happened within the last 24 hours. Within the last 24 hours, we had Phil Perry come out and talk about how players were complimentary of Maye. They liked what they saw from Maye at practice. Then we had Burt Breer on 98.5. Then we had Mark Daniels. All of a sudden, in the past 24 hours, we are hearing an awful lot about Maye. And we're hearing an awful lot about how good Maye looks. None of this is negative. None of this is, oh, well, people got to pump the brakes a little bit. Drake Maye, he might not be the real deal. I don't know if Drake Maye is ready. Drake Maye's been struggling at practice. Drake Maye's throwing intercept. None of that stuff is being said. Last 24 hours, Drake Maye, real deal. Drake Maye impressing defensive teammates. Drake Maye has defensive assistants gushing over his performance at practice. Everything within the last 24 hours. And the timing means something, folks. We are a week away this Sunday from the Miami game. And this is a Miami Dolphins team, of course, that will not have Tua Tagovailoa out there. They will have a backup quarterback. And so if you're going to play Drake Maye, if you roll with Drake Maye, week 5 against Miami, there's a good chance that Drake Maye is going to be the more talented quarterback on that field. There's a good chance that Drake Maye is going to look better, if not much better, than Miami's quarterback. Whoever that's going to be, whether it's Huntley or Skyler, whoever it's going to be. There's a good chance that Drake Maye, if he does start week 5 against Miami, looks like the better quarterback out there. And it will build confidence and it will get fans excited, right? So you're a week away from Miami without Tua playing. You're also coming off the worst offensive game of the year. That Jets game last week was putrid. And fans are sick and tired already. They're frustrated, right? We have to be better than that. We've got to be better than what we saw on Thursday night against the Jets. Are you telling me that Drake Maye can't play better than Jacoby Brissett played against the Jets? Are you kidding me? Right? So there's this frustration level building coming off that game against the Jets last week. You're a week away or so, a couple days in a week, from playing against a team that's going to have a backup quarterback. And it's going to be a home game. Home game against a backup quarterback. In all of this starts to come out, right? Phil Perry says this last night. And interestingly enough, this information starts to get out there on the Wednesday night right before the media is set to speak with Alex Van Pelt and other assistants. I find that to be interesting. The night before the offensive coordinator is going to go up there and speak to the media, we start to hear about how Drake Maye is wowing some teammates, impressing some teammates at practice. We all know that's going to lead to the media asking questions, right? Asking questions about Drake Maye's performance at practice. The first question, one of the first questions to Alex Van Pelt today was going to be, hey, how does Drake look? How's Drake Maye practicing? Is he performing well at practice? Does he look good? Does he look great? Because it was said last night by Phil, right? So Phil says it last night. That gets reporters working on some of this stuff. Bert's on radio talking about how Maye is the real deal. And you start to get this whirlwind of coverage about Drake Maye looking great at practice. Giddy up. And I find that hard to believe that this is all just coincidental. That coming off the Jets game, going out to the West Coast, this stuff wasn't being said early in the week. It wasn't being said last week. So it's after the Jets game, as you get ready to fly cross-country to play a tough San Francisco team, a team that just melted down against the Rams last weekend. It's going to be a very tough game for the Patriots on Sunday. And with a little bit more than a week away from playing a home game against a backup quarterback, all of it just seems to be way too coincidental for it to be a coincidence. I mean, we heard almost nothing. We heard almost nothing about Drake Maye's practice performances before the last 24 hours. I might have read something saying that he looked good, or the coaches have been impressed by what they've seen by him, or, they're pretty confident that he can end up being the guy. But it was not a barrage of reports. The last 24 hours, it's been Drake Maye this, Drake Maye that, Drake Maye this, Drake Maye that. Man, oh man, Drake Maye at practice. He's lighting it up. And before the last 24 hours, there wasn't much of that at all coming out from anywhere. Isn't it weird? Isn't it weird that we hadn't heard much about Drake Maye at practice and how he's been performing or not performing? And then all of a sudden, the last 24 hours, we're getting report after report. Now, it could be, Phil Perry says it last night, reporters ask questions. Reporters start to ask the coaches. The coaches start to answer these questions. There's no doubt some of that within all this. But I do find it fascinating that all of these reports, all of this information about Maye lighting up practice is coming out in the last 24 hours. Out of nowhere, Maye is lighting up practice. I feel like the Patriots are preparing fans for Drake Maye to start much sooner rather than later. And you could call it a PR campaign. You could call it fortuitous leaking or fortuitous conversations happening in the locker room. But it absolutely feels like the organization is getting the word out about how Drake Maye has played at practice to prepare fans to get them ready for Drake Maye starting a football game sooner rather than later. And because of all the last, all the information over the last 24 hours, I'm starting to feel like I would be surprised if Drake Maye doesn't start against the Dolphins, unless the Patriots go out to San Francisco this weekend and they somewhat turn around the offensive ship. Jacoby Brissett plays out of his mind. If Sunday at San Francisco is another slog, if Sunday at San Francisco is Jacoby Brissett hesitating, getting sacked a bunch, sometimes the sacks are on him, and the offense just isn't moving the football, they are easy to game plan for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'd be now shocked if Maye is not starting against the Miami Dolphins at Gillette Stadium. I'd be surprised at this point with all this stuff coming out the last 24 hours. Now, if Brissett plays better, if the offense gets going a little bit, then maybe the Patriots pump the brakes. But this absolutely feels like a sudden rush of information about Maye playing great at practice to get people ready in case the offense looks bad again this weekend. Operation Maye will be executed next week. It's almost setting things up for it, right? Because now we read about how great he looks at practice. Oh, he's getting ready, right? He's getting close. He looks great at practice. It's getting closer and closer. Maye could start any day now. And then if you watch on Sunday and the offense isn't good, you know for a fact. You know it. I know it. The American people know it during this election season, that the cries for Drake Maye are going to get even louder. And now the reports have been thrown out there. Now, if the Patriots name Drake Maye the starter next week, it doesn't look desperate. It doesn't look like a team reacting to the fan base, right? It doesn't seem like the coach is a little bit desperate to get better quarterback play, even if it's true. Because if these reports don't come out, if we're not hearing about Drake Maye lighting up practice and Brissett ends up and the offense ends up not playing well on Sunday, and on Monday you have people yelling and screaming and clamoring for Drake Maye to start against Miami, and then the Patriots come out and they announce that Drake Maye is going to start against Miami, that decision now looks reactive instead of proactive. But now that these reports have come out before you go to San Francisco, if the offense doesn't look great against San Francisco and you come out next week and you say, Drake Maye's ready. Drake Maye's ready. We're starting him against Miami. Now people can look back at these reports and say, well, that kind of makes sense because, last week we heard how great Drake Maye was looking at practice, right? And how he was looking during these practices and how the defensive players were speaking glowingly of him. It sets the stage to make the decision, to make that announcement next week. And you got through the 4 games that everybody or most people were talking about, hey, you got to get through the first 4 before you even think about playing Maye. And it just feels like that was the plan. And as the season has gone on, they felt better about the plan, more confident about the plan. And as they get ready for the Niners out on the West Coast, they're starting to plant the seeds so people are prepared for the announcement and the decision to come down next week. Unless the offense does something different, unexpected against the Niners, it just feels like to me that we are headed towards Drake Maye against the Miami Dolphins. It's how it feels. Terry jumps in with a $19.99 super chat, bonus pod super chat. Thanks, football emoji. Thank you, Terry. Always appreciate the super chats. You jump to the front of the line with your comment, your question. Also, obviously, help us out financially. So I appreciate you, Terry, so much for your continued support of the program. But it feels that way. It feels like these seeds are being planted. So on Sunday, if it doesn't go well, it looks like the Patriots are going to make the decision to go with Maye, not because they're reacting to the offense being terrible and not playing well. They're not reacting to a possible 1-3 start. They're being proactive. And they're going to start their rookie quarterback, who, if you haven't heard yet, has been lighting up practice. Seems a bit public relations-ish to me. Not saying it's a bad thing to get people ready. I don't think it's the right time to start Maye if that's the decision they make heading into the Miami game. I'm reading the tea leaves here. I could certainly be wrong, but I am reading the tea leaves. I'm reading the rush of information about Maye at practice as getting people prepared. Getting you all prepared to start that Miami game here at Gillette Stadium. And get the fans all pumped up, get them all jacked up, get them all lubed up on a Sunday at Gillette Stadium, right? You plant these seeds, some seeds of hope, some seeds of optimism. Yeah, we know that the Jets game was tough. We know San Francisco is going to be tough. But you should see Drake Maye at practice. Get ready for that guy. And then that leads into next week. And now you start talking about that guy. And you got a home crowd all fired up against the team with a backup quarterback. That's what it feels like to me. All right, bonus podcast. Had to jump on. Got to go. Have plans with the wife. Got to go run an errand. Just wanted to jump in before tomorrow's pod. Of course, tonight I'll have Crafts and Kickoffs at 7 o'clock. It's my NFL podcast. So be on the lookout for that. I'll have a beverage with all of you tonight, 7 o'clock on this YouTube channel, Talk NFL. And tomorrow at 3 p.m., we will have a Tom Warner full throttle 49ers preview for you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern right on this channel. You don't want to miss it. Appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your support. And catch us tonight at 7 o'clock. The Nick Cattle Show.